This
Started.
conference will now be recorded.
It's wonderful to have Ida here with us. Okay, Chazak, Chazak, Ida, strong and strong. Good, beautiful. Amen. I had said last week that we would be continuing with the Omer. We're going to hit a pause button. We'll turn to the Omer next week, but I wanted to speak about Yom Haatzmaut, about Israel Independence Day, which was yesterday. And before we begin, we're going to be studying the powerful and beautiful writings of Rav Soloveichik about the start of the state of Israel, about the divine grace that allowed this incredible event to take place. Before we start, I do want to touch upon our very dear Leah asked me, what are my thoughts about what's going on in Israel today? And I wanted to share very briefly my thoughts on that, and also as it relates to Yom Ha'atzmaut. So in Israel today, there is a lot of debate, strife, about proposed changes to the judicial system as to how the judges will be chosen. That is at the core what the issue is, and there are very, very strong opinions on both sides. And it has led to tremendous demonstrations going on, protests in Israel. And it's on one hand, it's disheartening to see such strife there in Israel, such division, right? As I wrote, though it hasn't gone out yet, but as I wrote in the weekly, we say on Pesach, at the Pesach Seder, we say Shelo Echad Bilvad Omdim Aleinu L'Kalotenu. It's not one person, it's not Echad, it's not one who rises against us to destroy us. But a Hasidic take on that is Shelo Echad. When we are not Echad, when we are not united, Bilvad, that alone, Omdim Aleinu L'Chalotenu. So that alone brings destruction to us. That alone wreaks havoc for us. So it's very disheartening that there is such strife. My personal view on it is that both sides have legitimate points, legitimate complaints, and I believe personally it is too far to one side right now. I think the change is being proposed, or we're pushing it too far to the other side. And right now they are in the midst of negotiations to try to find a middle ground, which, as I like to say, as I've said often, hopefully it'll be a compromise that no one is happy with, because that means it's a fair compromise. Okay? At the same time, there was a very interesting article that I just saw a little while ago about the unique protests in Israel. What is unique about the protests?
They're not being shut down.
They're not being shut down. They're not being arrested. They're not violent. For the most part, there are always some, but for the most part, where else in the world do you have protests of this magnitude which don't lead to arrests and don't lead to violence and to vandalism and to looting and who knows what else goes on? We know in America what else goes on. We've seen it many, many times. So with all of the problems and all the challenges, let's say, at the same time, we have to realize that, wow, the way this is being done is a very, very unique and something that we can actually be proud of. Okay, so that is a Yom Ha'atzmaut take on the protests that are going on today. So on our source sheets, different than in the past, we're going to be learning through, studying, reviewing together very, very incredibly powerful writings from Rav Soloveichik about, well, we'll see what it's about this. Yes, Steve.
personally have something of a problem with the way Shir Shirim is translated.
What is Shir Shirim?
Okay.
The Song of Songs. And Art Scroll apparently has taken to the
Yes.
But I want to get back to the original.
Okay. Okay. So Shir Shirim that Steve is referencing, the Song of Songs written by King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, speaks of two lovers and their relationship. And we understand it to be allegorical to Israel and God, the relation of Israel and God. Art Scroll chose, when they translate it, they don't go with a literal translation at all, but they go right to the drash, right to what the way the Medrash explains what it's referring to. And our very own Steve Bucksbaum here is more of a purist, and he feels that they have strayed too far and in not giving us more of a literal translation. I could hear that. That's certainly an opinion. I'm sure a lot of thought went into that, and that's what they chose to do. There are other translations that one can find. Right? If I'm translating, you can't blame me for choosing how to translate the way. Well, you could choose me for mistranslating. You can't blame me for choosing a mode of translation for a very unique sefer. I mean, it is such a love story that the Talmud tells us that there were those who felt that it should have been banned or should not have been considered to be part of the Sifrei Kodesh, part of our scripture, part of our prophets. The Gemara's conclusion is not only is it Kodesh, not only is it holy, but it is Kodesh Kadashim. It is the holy of holies, the holiest of holies. Now, the way that Rav Soloveichik actually translates is much more along the Steve Bucksbaum approach and more of a literal translation. So let's see, he begins with these verses in Shir HaShirim in the chapter 5, the first page of our notes. Bati Legani, I have come to my garden. Achoti Kala, my dear, my own, my bride. Ariti Mori im Besami, I've plucked my myrrh and spice. Achalti yari im davshi, eaten my honey and the honeycomb. Shatiti yeni, drank my wine. Im chalavi, with my milk. Ichlu re'in, eat, lovers. Shtu, drink. Vishichru dodim, and drink deep of love. Ani yeshena, I was asleep. V'libi air, but my heart was awake. Kol dodi dofek, my beloved one, the sound of my beloved one is dofek. He is knocking. Pitchu li achoti rayati yanati tamati. Open up the door for me, my darling, my dove. I mean, there's more, right? Achoti, my dear one, my loved one, my dove, tamati, my pure one. Sheroshi nimlatal, l'kavutzotai resisei laila. My head is drenched with dew, my locks, my hair with the damp of night. This is so, I mean, every time we read this every year on Pesach, on Passover. And these psukim, they haunt me every time I hear them. Pashatati et kutanti. I have taken off my robe. Eichacha el bashana. How can I put it on again? Rachatzti et ragli. I've washed my feet. Eichacha atanfeim. How can I go and soil them and dirty them again? The following is written by Rav Yosef Dov Soloveichik, I have a little bio over here. Born in Poland, 1903, to a family known, legendary, royalty of Torah scholarship. The Brisker dynasty, as it's known. Rav Chaim of Brisk was his grandfather. His father was Rav Moshe. He was taught from them. He then pursued secular studies at University of Berlin, received a PhD in philosophy. In 1932, he came to America, settled in Boston. In 1941, he succeeded his father as Rosh Yeshiva of the Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Theological Seminary of Yeshiva University. He became the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva University and was legendary in his leadership and the explosive growth of Yeshiva University. He writes as follows: what is the essence of the story of the Song of Songs, if not the description of a paradoxical and tragic hesitation? Right? I've taken off my shoes. How can I put them on? I've taken off my cloak. How can I put it on? My feet will get dirty. The paradoxical and tragic hesitation on the part of the love-intoxicated, anxiety-stricken lover, that when the opportunity couched in majestic awe presented itself. What is it if not the deferral of a great and sublime opportunity? A chance that was missed, pregnant with a possibility of which she dreamed, for which she fought, for which she sought, for which she had searched with all the fervor of her soul. The delicate and refined lover, passion-driven to her fair-eyed beloved, who in days resplendent in brightness wandered the paths of the vineyards, the mountain ridges, through wheat fields and orchards, and in the evenings bathed in the pale light of an enchanting moon, more gloomy with darkness, passed between the walls in search of her lover. She returned one rain-stormy night to her tent, tired, weary. She fell asleep. The patter of quick-moving, light footsteps was heard in the stillness of the tent. In that mysterious and strange night, the beloved for whom she had so hoped and kept watch suddenly appeared out of the darkness and beckoned at the entrance of her tent. He knocked and pleaded, "Open the door for him. Listen, my beloved is knocking, saying, 'Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my undefiled. My head is drenched with dew, my locks with the damp of the night.'" The great moment for which she had been waiting with such longing came at a time of inattentiveness. The elusive and secretive beloved, weary of wandering and tribulations, appeared with his curly locks, black eyes, powerful build, and shining countenance. He wanted to recount to her his mighty love, his longing and yearning for a life together, filled with desire and joy, and fulfillment of expectations, realization of dreams. A simple extension of the hand to turn the lock, open the door, unlock the door, separated the lover and her beloved. It separated the great dream from its complete fulfillment. With one leap, the lover could have attained all her life's desires. "Draw me, we will run after you. Our rutsa, we will run. We will be glad. Nagila v'nismecha bach, we will rejoice in you." But that very night, sloth, the result of a strange inertia, took hold of the lover. For one small moment, the flame of yearning that burned within her was buried. The mighty desire withered. Her feelings and dreams were silenced. She refused, the lover refused to leave her bed. She did not open the door of her tent to her handsome beloved. A cruel confusion swept her into forgetfulness and apathy. The lover became lazy and stubborn. She poured forth countless excuses and pretexts to explain her strange behavior. "I have removed my cloak. How shall I put it on again? I have washed my feet. How shall I soil them?" The lover did not respond to the voice of the beloved. The door to her tent was locked shut. The opportunity was lost, and the vision of an exalted life died. True, for a brief delay, the lover awoke from her slumber and jumped in haste from her bed to greet the beloved. I rose to open to my beloved, but the leap came too late. The beloved had stopped beckoning and had disappeared into the darkness of the night. That is Rav Soloveitchik's beautiful, deep, touching description of Steve, the literal translation. Of course, we know this is a reference to God in Israel. That no one debates. Solomon was not writing one of these, I don't know what they're called even, one of these novels, one of these romantic novels. Is it Lifetime, or who makes those movies? Lifetime classics. Hallmark, right? Shlomo HaMelech was not writing a Hallmark romantic novel over here. Everyone agrees he's referring to Israel and God. But we did not respond. Rav Soloveichik continues and writes, 8 years ago, in the midst of the night of the terrors of Majdanek, Treblinka, and Buchenwald, in a night of gas chambers, crematoria, in a night of total divine self-concealment, in a night ruled by the devil of doubt and destruction, who sought to sweep the lover from her own tent into the Catholic Church, in a night of continuous searching for the beloved. On that very night, the beloved appeared. The Almighty, who was hiding in his splendid sanctum, suddenly appeared and began to beckon at the tent of the lover, who tossed and turned on her bed, beset by convulsions and the agonies of hell. Because of the beating and knocking at the door of the mournful lover, the state of Israel was born. This is his introduction to Kol Dodi Dofek, as the pasuk said, as the verse said in Shir Hashirim, Kol, the voice of my beloved, Dofek, is knocking. How many times did the beloved knock on the door of the lover? It appears to me, Rav Soloveichik writes, we can count at least 6 knocks. And he goes through now 6 knocks, 6 awakenings that we have, 6 incredible components of what happened in 1948 with the birth of the state of Israel. First, the knock of the beloved was heard in the political arena. From the point of view of international relations, no one will deny that the rebirth of the state of Israel, in a political sense, was an almost supernatural occurrence. Both Russia and the Western nations supported the establishment of the state of Israel. This was perhaps the one resolution on which East and West concurred during the Cold War era. I am inclined to believe, he writes, the United Nations was especially created for this end, for the sake of fulfilling the mission that divine providence had placed upon it. It appears to me that one cannot point to any other concrete accomplishment on the part of the United Nations. He wrote this many decades ago, but it remains the same. I did not know who the representatives of the press, with their human eyes, saw to be the chairman in that fateful session of the General Assembly in which the creation of the state of Israel was decided. But he who looked carefully with his spiritual eye saw the true chairman, capital C, who conducted the proceedings, the beloved. He knocked with his gavel on the lectern. Do we not interpret the passage on the night the king could not sleep? That's written in Esther, in the book of Esther, written presumably about Achashverosh, the king. But do we not interpret that to mean the king of the universe? could not sleep? If Achashverosh alone had been sleepless, the matter would not have been at all important and salvation would not have arisen on that night. If, however, the king, the master of the universe, could not sleep, as it were, redemption would be born. If just anyone were to have opened the session of the United Nations, the state of Israel would not have been born. But it was the beloved, it was God who knocked on the chairman's lectern, and the miracle materialized. Listen, my beloved knocks. Call Dodi, Dofek. The call of my beloved, he knocks. Second, the knock of the beloved was heard on the battlefield. The tiny defense forces of the state of Israel defeated the mighty Arab armies. We now are used to having a very, very powerful army. Then what was the army? It was the Haganah, it was the Letzi, it was these different groups. And then there were hundreds of people who flew in from the United States, from South Africa, from Great Britain, from France, who were there ready to fly planes, even though the planes hardly flew, and to go out on these missions. Yes, Leah.
There are also a lot of people that just came from Europe after the Holocaust, had no idea, didn't know how to carry a gun.
Yes.
Never fought, had no clue.
You had the Nitzolei HaShoah, those who had escaped from Europe.
Yeah, and they went, many of them got killed.
Yes.
Many of them, prepared
Yes.
to the efforts. Yeah. And the whole population was traumatized.
Of course.
Like, they can't even live.
The miracle of the Rabbim Biad Ma'atim. That's before he referenced Purim. Now he's referencing Hanukkah, where we say that there were the many into the hands of the few. The miracle of the many into the hands of the few materialized before our eyes. An even greater miracle happened. God hardened the heart of Ishmael and commanded him to go into battle against the state of Israel. Had the Arabs not declared war on Israel and instead supported the partition plan, the state of Israel would have remained without Jerusalem, without a major portion of the Galilee, and without some areas of the Negev. If thousands of years ago Pharaoh had allowed the children of Israel to leave immediately, as Moses had originally requested, Moses would have been bound by his word to return in 3 days. Pharaoh, however, hardened his heart and did not listen to Moses. The Holy One then took Israel out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Consequently, the force of the promise that we would return to Egypt was vitiated. No contract that is based upon mutuality of promise binds one side if the other party refuses to fulfill its obligations. Right? The whole 3-day journey was based upon Pharaoh's agreement. He did not agree. We were not bound to that. We left. In a similar vein, he says, they hardened their hearts, decided to battle, and that's what gave us so much more of the land of Israel. I'm sorry, Ida, what were you saying?
No, I say, my brother Bissy flew over there to fight with them.
Wow.
I lived there since.
Wow. Ida's brother flew from the United States to Israel during that war, the War of Independence, to fight with the Jews. It was hardly even the Israelis at that point. It was all just the Jews gathering together.
He wasn't alone. There were
Yes. Many. Yeah. So that, he said, is the second knock. Not just the victory of the many to hands of the few, but they decided to go into battle, giving us that much more. And I will just add, in a similar vein, when it came to the 6-day war, so we were fighting Egypt, we were fighting in the south, fighting Syria in the north, and plus all the soldiers from Iraq and Lebanon who come through Syria. And we reached out to the king of Jordan, stay out. We have no beef with you. At that point, of course, the king of Jordan controlled the old city of Jerusalem, including, of course, the Jewish quarter, which they had desecrated and destroyed the synagogues there. And we had no access to the Kotel. We asked them, don't come in. They came in. And as a result, Harabayit Biyadenu, we captured Jerusalem. And all of those, all the West Bank, Hebron, all the holy cities of Yehuda and Shomron, similar, that they hardened their hearts and dove in, and that's what gave us that blessing. Third, the third knock, called Dodi Dofek. The beloved also began to knock on the door of the tent of theology, and possibly this is the strongest beckoning. I have on several occasions emphasized in my remarks concerning the land of Israel that the theological arguments of Christian theologians to the effect that the Holy One has taken away from the community of Israel its rights to the land of Israel, and that all of the biblical promises relating to Zion and Jerusalem now refer in an allegorical sense to Christianity and the Christian church, were all publicly shown to be false, baseless contentions by the establishment of the state of Israel. One must have a broad familiarity with theological literature from the time of Justin Martyr down to theologians of our own day to comprehend the full extent of this marvel by which the central axiom of Christian theology was shattered. We should pay careful attention to the learned explanation of our Secretary of State, Mr. Dulles, who served as the deacon of an Episcopalian church, to a committee of the United States Senate, that the Arabs hate the Jews because they killed the founder of their religion. That's what this Secretary of State. The Arabs hate the Jews. Why? Because they killed the founder of their religion. This explanation possesses hidden and deep symbolic significance. Sometimes when a person speaks too much, something of the truth slips out. When one of the senators asked the Secretary of State, why do the Arabs hate the Jews? He personally wanted to answer, personally, I too, as a Christian, have no great love for them because they killed our Messiah and consequently forfeited their portion of Abraham's heritage. An angel sat in the throat of the secretary, and instead of saying our Lord and for myself, he let the other words slip out, the Arabs and Muhammad. In his subconscious, he was terrified of the awful fact that the community of Israel rules over Zion and Jerusalem. I find satisfaction in reading about the state of Israel in the Catholic and Protestant newspapers. Despite themselves, they must mention the name of Israel when they report the news of Zion and Jerusalem, which we possess. I have always have a special sense of satisfaction when I read in the paper that Israel's reaction is not as yet known because today is Saturday. Government offices are closed. Or when I read on the eve of Passover an item from the UP, the United Press, that Jews will sit down tonight to the Seder table in the hope that the miracles of Egypt will return and recur today. Listen, Kol Dodi Dofek, my beloved knocks. Wow. Fourth, the beloved knocks in the heart of the youth, which is assimilated and perplexed. The period of Hester Panim, God hiding his face in the 1940s, brought confusion among the Jewish masses, especially Jewish youth. Assimilation increased. The urge to flee from Judaism and Jewish people reached its apex. Fear, despair, ignorance caused many to forsake the Jewish community and to climb aboard the ship, to flee to Tarshish, of course a reference to Jonah, from the presence of the Lord. A seemingly unstoppable tidal wave stood over us and threatened to destroy us. Suddenly the beloved began to beckon to the hearts of the perplexed, and his beckoning, the establishment of the state of Israel, at least slowed the process of flight. Many who were once alienated are now bound to the Jewish state with ties of pride in its mighty accomplishments. Many American Jews who were partially assimilated find themselves beset by hidden fear and concern for any crisis the state of Israel is at the time passing through. And they pray for its well-being and welfare, even though they are far from being totally committed to it. Even Jews who are hostile to the state of Israel must defend themselves from the strange charge of dual loyalty and proclaim daily and declare they have no stake in the Holy Land. It is good for a Jew when he cannot ignore his Jewishness and is obliged to perpetually answer the question, who are you? Miata, Umato said, what is your occupation? The questions that were posed to Jonah when the storm was threatening that ship. Even when extraordinary fear grips him, and he does not have the strength or fortitude to answer with true pride. But having to confront that question is something that shakes a person in a positive way. I am a Jew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven. That was the true pride answer of Jonah. And even when one is not ready to give that answer, one is shaken by the question, and it pushes us, wakes us up to our true identity. The unrelenting question of who are you ties him to the Jewish people, even if he wants out. The very mention of the name of Israel is a reminder to the fleeing Jew that he cannot escape from the community of Israel in whose midst he has been enmeshed from birth. Everywhere we turn, we hear the name Israel. We listen to a radio station. We open a paper. We participate in a debate on current events. We always encounter the question of Israel. It is always a topic of public concern. They hide like Jonah in his day in the recesses of the ship, and they seek to slumber. The captain with a capital C, however, does not permit them to ignore their fate. The shadow of Israel continuously chases after them. And when a Jew begins to think, to reflect, when he is unable to sleep, it is impossible to know where his thoughts will ultimately take him. Listen, call Dodi Dofek. The sound of my beloved knocks. Yes, Steve.
I almost don't know how to express this, but I have such immense respect for our Chachamim who are able to present such an argument and draw from so many different places.
Yeah.
And quote the right
So beautifully.
things.
So beautifully. Purim, Hanukkah, Egypt, right? Jonah.
Who
It's
is Jonah? You mentioned it.
Jonah and the whale.
Okay. So that's
Jonah of whale fame, right? On the ship, right? And he's approached.
Why is Jonah mentioned here?
Okay, because Jonah was trying to flee from God,
Okay.
to withhold his prophecy. And he was asleep on the boat, but he was wakened up. Who are you? Wake up. Who are you? What do you do? To which people do you belong? So Rav Soloveichik is so eloquently, so poignantly comparing that to the Jews who wanted to forget that they were Jewish. And they went to sleep in the deep recesses of the ship. And the captain with a capital C through the state of Israel is knocking and saying, who are you? What nation are you from? What do you do? And that's the constant reminder that God sends to every Jew, no matter where he is. Because you can't read the newspaper without something about Israel. You can't listen to the radio without Israel. You can't hear a debate of current events without Israel. That was true when he wrote this 30 years ago, and that's true today. So you can run, you can't hide. Yes, Allah.
Can I
Sure.
I was listening to some rabbi. I don't remember when or where, and on YouTube for sure. That he was talking about basically millions of people left Egypt, millions, 600 men, but if you count all of them. And there was a huge percentage of non-Jews, ethnically, who left with, and they, during the whole history, those who left, not all of them, of course, a certain percentage, were not comfortable with being Jewish, and that manifested itself in many times. Those were the ones who built the Golden Calf.
Okay.
Those are the ones who were self-hating Jews, like Karl Marx, or a lot of other Jews, hating Jews, self-hating. Those that had Jewish names and supposedly had all the trimmings of being Jewish, they were not comfortable with being Jewish. And especially at the times when Jews were persecuted, those who left Judaism were, in large percentage, those who attached themselves to Jews and then didn't feel comfortable. The real test of being Jewish is when Jews are in difficult times, and those, like in Russia today.
Yeah.
You know, the millions of Russians who left, or millions, hundreds of thousands who left Russia today to go to Israel. They're searching, some Jewish grandparents, changing themselves, falsifying their documents to try
to show that they can come to Israel.
And it's so remarkable, it's so disgusting, honestly, when the whole population of Russians was hating Jews, despising Jews, and now they want to be Jewish.
Yeah, to me it sounds like a little inkling of the messianic times that will come.
Unfortunately, there are about 30% of non-Jews in Israel today.
Yeah.
They created a Slovenian forum, Slovenian bazaar, and they wanted Christmas trees, and they on squares of.
Look, there are always challenges. I'm with you. There are always challenges, right? But this has certainly woken up that Israel certainly serves as a wake up for the dormant Jew, or as a constant irritant to that dormant Jew, not allowing him or her to forget where they are. Sorry? Yeah.
Another one you could throw here is when Adam eats the fruit. Ayaka, like who are you?
Yeah.
Where are you is different.
Who are you? Nice. The fifth knock of the beloved, perhaps the most important. For the first time in the annals of our exile, divine providence has amazed our enemies with the astounding discovery: Jewish blood is not cheap.
Right.
If the anti-Semites describe this phenomenon as being an eye for an eye, we will agree with them. If we want to courageously defend our continued national and historical existence, from time to time, we must interpret the verse, an eye for an eye, literally. So many eyes were lost in the course of our bitter exile because we did not repay hurt for hurt. The time has come for us to fulfill the simple meaning of ayin tachat ayin, an eye for an eye. Of course, I'm sure everyone recognizes I am an adherent of the oral law. And from my perspective, there is no doubt that the verse refers to monetary restitution, as defined by halacha. However, with respect to the mufti and Nasser, I would demand that we interpret the verse in accordance with its literal meaning, the taking of an actual eye. Revenge is forbidden when it is pointless. But if one is aroused thereby to self-defense, it is the most elementary right of man to take his revenge, if that's what will get us to the point of self-defense. The Torah has always taught a man is permitted, indeed as a sacred obligation, to defend himself. With the verse, if a burglar is caught in the act of breaking in, the Torah establishes the halacha that one may defend not only one's life, but his property as well. For a good reason, the Torah relates that two of its great heroes, Abraham and Moses, took sword in hand to defend their brethren. And when Abraham heard that his kinsman Lot was taken captive, he led forth his retainers, his army. And when Moses saw the Egyptian smite a Jew, he struck down the Egyptian. This behavior does not contradict the principle of loving kindness and compassion. On the contrary, a passive position without self-defense may sometimes lead to the most awesome brutality. And I will gain honor from Pharaoh and all his hosts, his chariots and his horsemen, and the Egyptians will know I am the Lord. God did not seek honor or recognition. He wanted Pharaoh, Moses' contemporary, to know that he must pay a high price for his edict that every male child born shall be cast into the river. His present desire is that the blood of Jewish children who were slain as they recited the 18 benedictions of the daily prayer, the Amidah, shall also be avenged. When God smote the Egyptians, he sought to demonstrate there will always be accountability for the spilling of Jewish blood. At present, it is necessary not only to convince the dictator of Egypt, but the self-righteous Nehru, the Foreign Office in London, and the sanctimonious members of the United Nations that Jewish blood is not cheap. Therefore, how laughable it is when they try to persuade us to rely on the declaration of the three great powers guaranteeing the status quo. We all know from experience what value can be attached to the pronouncements of the British Foreign Office and the so-called friendship of certain officials in our State Department. In general, how absurd is the request that an entire people be dependent on the kindness of others and remain without the ability to defend itself. Public and private honor is dependent upon the possibility of defending one's life and one's honor. A people that cannot defend its freedom and tranquility is neither free nor independent. Thank God we have lived to see the day, with the help of God, Jews have it within their power to defend themselves. And this is always one of the, thank you, Esther. This is always one of the basic principles of the state of Israel, with all the military help and companionship and partnership we have with the USA. We don't want your soldiers fighting for us. We're not going to rely on anyone else fighting for us. We want to fight for ourselves, and with God's help, we will continue to be successful. Let us not forget the poison of Hitlerite anti-Semitism, which made Jews fair game to all, still permeates this generation. The antidote for this venom that poisoned minds and dulled hearts is the readiness of the state of Israel to defend the lives of its citizens. Listen, Kol Dodi Dofek, my beloved Knox.
Rabbi, the same thing happened in 72 at the Olympics. The Germans were ill prepared to respond.
Yeah.
And was it Rabin who said, Jews must defend Jewish life?
Yeah. We wanted to send in ours, and they didn't allow, and we saw how inept they were.
Right.
How inept the Germans were in defending Jewish life. Surprised? The sixth beckoning, of which we also should not lose sight, was heard at the time of the opening of the gates of the land of Israel. A Jew escaping from an enemy's land now knows that he or she can find refuge in the land of our forefathers. Right? To this day, my father-in-law, he should be well, right, would always say, make sure your passports are up to date. Make sure your passports are up to date. You never know. You never know when you've got to run. He's a World War II veteran. You never know when you have to run. And yeah, we think United States is such a bastion of peace and tranquility and security, and it has been the most incredible exile that we have ever experienced. So not in any way to take away from the tremendous appreciation and debt of gratitude that we have to this wonderful country. But do you know how long the Jews were in Poland?
1,000 years.
Yeah, I think 900 something years. It was referred to in Hebrew, Polin. Here we will rest. Here we have settled. And we all know how long that lasted. And here we are rounding, another few years will hit 250 years, right? A quarter of the amount of time that we were there in Poland. And, we see that there is today a lot more extremism than we've dealt with in the past.
Look at the fence that we have around this synagogue.
Yeah. Right. When I moved here in 2008, there were no fences around the shul.
No security guard.
No security guard. No need for any of that. I saw a billboard. I was driving to LA one day. Right. Does your church need armed security? Our synagogues do. Yeah. Our synagogues do. A Jew escaping from an enemy's land now knows that he can find refuge in the land of his forefathers. This is a new phenomenon in the annals of our history. Up to now, when a Jewish population was uprooted, it wandered in the wilderness of the nations without finding shelter and habitation. The shutting of the gates in the face of the exiled caused total destruction for much of the Jewish people. Now the situation has changed. When any nation expels its Jewish minority, the exiled now direct their steps to Zion, and she, as a compassionate mother, absorbs them. Right? And we keep hearing, whenever there is an uptick of anti-Semitism, of trouble in the land, we see that the rate of aliyah increases. We have that home to go to. We are all witnesses to the settlement of Oriental Jewry in Israel over the last several years, right? Bringing from Yemen and all those countries. Who knows what would have been in store for these brothers of ours in the lands of their origin, if not for the state of Israel, which brought them to her in planes and ships. The verse speaks about the kanfei nisharim, right? The wings of eagles, one of the streets in Yerushalayim leading to Har Nof, going through, is Rehov Kanfei Nisharim, the wings of eagles. Actually, some of these Jews were living in such a backward state that when they saw the planes landing there in the desert to pick them up, to them it was, and in truth it was the fulfillment of this, I'll bring you to the land on the wings of eagles. They had never seen an airplane before. And all of a sudden this thing lands from the sky, loads them in. They'd taken out all the seats to fit in as many people as they could. When things got cold, some of them started to make a fire on the plane. They were advised that might not be the best idea. But for them, this was otherworldly. This was miraculous. And in fact, not just for them, it was miraculous. So we're jaded by our technological advances, but it was miraculous. Had Israel been born before the Hitlerian Holocaust, hundreds of thousands of Jews could have been saved from the gas chambers and the crematoria. The miracle of the state tarried somewhat. And in the wake of its delay, thousands and tens of thousands of Jews were taken to the slaughter. Now that the hour of Hester Panim is God hiding his face, has passed, however, the possibility exists for Jews who are pried from their homes to take root in their holy land. This should not be taken lightly. Listen Call Dodi Dofake. Listen, my beloved knocks. Wow.
Actually, there were 12 million Jews killed, not 6 million Jews, according to some recent calculations. 6 million was the figure that Stalin and Churchill decided on to proclaim that's what
I don't know. I don't know if historians, Jewish historians, also agree with that. But the truth is, whether it's 12 million, whether it's 6 million, whether it's 1 million, it is I'm not saying it's 1 million, but no matter what it is, right? It is an unimaginable loss and destruction. I mean, Natalie and I, a while ago, we had the opportunity to visit Costa Rica, and as we're getting a tour there, we hear from the guide that the population of Costa Rica is approximately, you guessed it, 6 million. And we look at each other like, wow. It gives you a sense, because we can't wrap our heads around the number of 6 million. But when you hear an entire country, its population is 6 million, oh. This city has a population of 6 million. Oh, that's a busy city. There's a lot going on over there. That's an entire country. Yeah. But we have to recognize the gift. As I always say, we for thousands of years we've sang in our Shir Hamalot, B'shuv Hashem et Shivat Zion, Hayinu kecholmim. When God will bring back the remnant of Zion, we will be kecholmim, like dreamers. And we were born into the dream, we are living with that dream. And not to take it for granted. And with all of the challenges that Israel presents, and with all of the dissent that we have in Israel today, we can't lose sight of this miracle, of this call, Dodi Dofek, how the voice of our beloved knocked and returned to the door and opened the door himself when we were unwilling or unable to open the door at that point. He opened the door and ushered in a whole new, incredible stage of Jewish history. I remember when at Israel's 70th anniversary, so that really struck me. The whole Babylonian exile that we speak about between the first and second temple was 70 years. And here we are, 70 plus years in the state of Israel. Kain Yirbu, may it continue, may they continue strong, and may it lead, because it's an intermediary step. And we hope and pray daily that it should lead to the Mashiach Tzidkenu, the ultimate coming of the Messiah and the redemption. May it be b'mheira v'yameinu, amen. Speedily in our days. Okay. Yashikoach, everybody.
Will we resume Sefirot next week?
I'm sorry?
Will we resume the Sefirot?
That is the plan. Next week we'll resume to our regular programming. We pause for station identification, for Jewish identification.
Hooray, Rabbi.
Okay, guys.
This is a special lesson.